Oh yeah, this is
Walking around town here, taking pictures. After I first moved back here, I walked into the post office and I saw this beautiful mural up on the wall, and I wondered, what is that mural? It looked like some 1930s characters. And so I found out that it was a post office mural, and it was painted by a lady named Martell, and eventually found out that she was at the St. Genevieve Art Colony. And then I got into it a little bit more and found out that there's about 1,371 of these murals around the United States in post offices, and that a number of instructors and students here at the St. Genevieve Art Colony in the 30s ended up painting them. So I think this is one of the lasting legacies of the art colony. We have all this beautiful art colony artwork here, but not many people get to see all of that. But they do get to walk into post offices and see some of the Now, one of the things that you normally hear about this is that this was a WPA project. And it really wasn't a WPA, which is Works Project Administration. It is a New Deal program that was in the 30s, started by Roosevelt. And it was actually 4 programs. And it's an alphabet of letters. But the first one was the Public Works and Art Project, PWAP, and it just went for a couple of years. In 1933, there were about 10,000 artists that were out of work. And I think it was Edward Bruce who was one of the ones that originated this program. He said, we recognize that the artist, like the labor, capitalist, and office worker, eats, drinks, and has a family, and pays rent. Thus contradicting the old superstition that the painter and the sculptor live in attics and exist on inspiration. I know there's a lot of you out here and can appreciate that. But this program was really designed to promote art in public buildings, hospitals, federal buildings, things of that sort, and not the post office. It could be in parks and museums, and it was a need-based kind of program because these people were out of work. And they ended up with 3,749 artists creating 15,633 works of art just on this program in 2 years. So the next program that came along was something called TARP, not the TARP that we know about today. And that started in 1935, and again, it was a program to help people, artists in need. 90% of them had to be on relief rolls. And this was a rather small program. It was only $875,000. But it did employ 356 artists, and they ended up painting 89 murals, 65 sculptures, and 10,000 easel paintings. You wonder where all of these things are. I mean, what a great part of our art history. Then came the Works Project Administration, the true WPA. That was a big program. It lasted about the same as the Post Office Mural program, but it was called the Federal One Project. And it wasn't just art. It was music, theater, writers, and historic record survey. And they came into St. Genevieve, the Historic Writers Survey did, and talked. And there's a section of WPA on St. Genevieve that writers did. But again, a little facts on that. They had 5,300 visual artists, 2,500 murals in hospitals, schools, and other public places, 108,000 easel paintings. And they 18,000 sculptures and 22,000 plate images of America, furnishings, and artifacts. And one of the other things that they did is they staffed art centers in about 22 states so that kids and adults could learn how to be artists. The program I'm going to talk to you about was really a treasury program. And the Treasury Department managed a lot of these. And it was called the Treasury Section of Paintings and Sculptures, and also known as the Treasury Section of Fine Arts, and it lasted from 1935 to 1943, so quite a ways. What was different about this program was that it was to decorate post offices. and that it wasn't a need-based thing. This was going to be based purely on talent. So that's what's really different about all those other three programs and the post office mural. A guy named George Biddle, who was a classmate of Roosevelt, was the one that suggested this mural program. He had been a classmate and a friend of Roosevelt. It was kind of based on the, I guess back in the 1920s, there was a big program in Mexico of doing murals. And there was like 4 or 5 famous artists that did those. And so this was kind of would be kind of based on the same thing. And I found a quote by Roosevelt. He said, the art to be painted had to be native, human, eager, and alive. All of it painted in their own kind, in their own country, and painted about things they know and look at often and have touched and loved. And I think when we hear more about the art colony, it kind of, that fit right in with what they were doing. Funding was always a problem, but what they said on this one, since it wasn't going to be need-based, 1% of any post office being built during this time period, they'd set aside 1% of the cost for decorations. So that's basically how they funded it. I guess it's called artistic embellishments. Typically, that would cost about $600 per building, and it was about $10 per square feet. These murals are typically 4 by 12 or 5 by 15. So, 5 by 15 would be $750. And some of your guys' paintings I know go for a little bit more than that, and they're a little bit smaller. But back then, I guess that was pretty good money. Now, since it was based on talent, how did they start this selection process? They did both national competitions and regional competitions. And in the regional, they had 16 different regions. They had an appointed chairman. He would get a jury together, and artists and scholars and the like. And then they would go publicize that, hey, they want people to submit ideas. Sometimes on the national level, they had a national jury. On the local level, and I'll go through that creative process because it was quite involved. But they would publish the competition in local newspapers. The Treasury Department had its own bulletin, and they would say, okay, we're going to do a post office here or there, and you can submit sketches. And then the jury would decide whether or not which one they would use for that post office. Now, sometimes they would use honorable mentions from the previous competition and not do that typical selection process. And sometimes they just went out and asked the artist to do it again. One of the ones that the St. Genevieve artist painted was not in a competition. They just liked what she did, and they said, okay. Some do's and don'ts. And when you look at this art, a lot of it is very similar. It was in the American scene style, and the American scene style was based on a style of painting that came in France 100 years earlier, I think. I am not an art student, so bear with me, but I think it was at Artisan in France, had this style of painting. So they were taking that methodology of painting and moving it into America. It was supposed to be straightforward realism, portraying subjects easily recognized by the ordinary citizens. And it really championed the Midwestern regionalists. We're going to talk about regionalism a little bit, but Grant Wood, famous picture with the pitch park mom and dad, Thomas Hart Benton, and John Stewart Curry. That's who they set the examples. These are the kind of people we want you to submit ideas in. I love some of the don'ts. They didn't want to see anything on civil unrest, riots, labor unions, guys beating up labor unions during the strike. They didn't want to see any of that. They didn't want to see any nudity. Now, however, if they painted Native Americans, they were in a breechcloth or something, so that came about the closest to it. They darn well didn't want any abstract style, or what they call it, a European modernism style. None of that. It seems, I think the men were usually the ones that were portrayed as heroic, very few of the women. And there were very few pictures that had African Americans in it. And you got to think of the time period that's going on here. They ended up having 15 national competitions. One was a famous one's called the 48 States competition, and 175 regional competitions. I got amazed when I saw the magnitude of the scope of this program. 15,426 artists submitted sketches for this. And there were over 40,000 sketches. They asked them to submit up to 4. And the way this all worked was the first thing you would do, you would submit a sketch in a scale of 1 inch equals 1 foot in black and white and also 1 in color. And that's what would be sent to those juries, and they would decide, okay, we're going to go forward. And after that they also suggested that the artist visit the area where the post office is going to be. Well, that got to be a little difficult because the people didn't have a lot of money then and traveling. And when we talk about the St. Genevieve artists, most of those were Midwesterners out of St. Louis and here. And they go into Indiana, South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma. So a lot of times they didn't travel. So a lot of this stuff got handled by letters back and forth. But after they selected, and this is actually the sketch for this particular post office mural, and it kind of shows the first phase. Well, if you were selected, then you submitted a picture of a 2-scale drawing. So here you're going to draw this, 5 foot by 12 foot, and then take a picture of it, and that would get sent in. And then lastly, the third stage is you would actually do the painting and then install the mural in the post office. There was always a lot of work between that first stage and the third stage, and sometimes not without controversy. And yes?
Did they paint on the wall though? Or did they?
There's only two of them that are painted on the wall.
Really?
Most of them are on canvas. They got paid, it was going to be anywhere from $400 to $750, $800, and they got paid in installments. After they got their first little sketch in, they got a small amount. After they got the cartoon part in, and by the way, this program was not just paintings. There was also a sculpture part of it. And so in that middle phase, which was called the cartoon phase, they would actually have to build a little scale model of the sculpture that they were going to do. Well, after they got the second phase done, and then they had to go out and actually do the work and install it in the post office. And until the postmaster sent a letter back to Washington, they weren't going to get their final payment. Little trivia, there were 1,371 murals painted under this program by 850 artists. And I kind of did a percentage on that. Actually, the St. Genevieve Art Colony artists have a higher percentage of both women and just numbers that painted those. 162 were women. That percentage is higher than that of the St. Genevieve group. There were only 3 African Americans that painted murals. And as Bonnie said, only 2 of them were painted on the walls directly. One was painted on slate. That was in an area where slate was a big deal, so that's what the artist did. I want to show you, typically, when you go in our post office, you walk in the front door, and on the left you see the postmaster's door, and these murals are over that door. And I wanted to show you, here's the postmaster's door, but these are some of the different styles that showed up. And I want you to kind of think about these when we start looking at the styles that the St. Genevieve Art Colony artists painted. This one's out of Kearney, New York, Ontario, Oregon. And this one, it's not as distinct in the painting style as this one was. And I mentioned sculptures. They had a whole bunch of different kinds of sculptures. The one on the left is 5.5 foot by 7 foot tall cast aluminum. That's a postman delivering mail. This one, the one in the middle, it's actually a little farming scene, sewing grain by hand, and that was a terracotta. Here's a plaster relief of a big eagle with mercury. The post office was delivering mail at the speed of mercury. And this is one out in Arizona, and so you can see they were kind of using the area out there. That was some Apache chiefs like Geronimo that the guy was memorializing. Now let's get to the St. Genevieve Art Colony, because that's what I think all of you are interested in. The Art Colony started in 1932. A guy named Bernard Peters and Jesse Beard Brickley were painters that had painted up in Massachusetts on Cape Cod and Provincetown. I think there was a number of art colonies up there. The Depression comes along and they can't travel as much as they used to. So these two decided that, I think Bernard Peters had come down here and he's found that he was really enchanted with St. Genevieve. And so they came down and opened up an art colony here. And it was based on the Cape Cod School concept. And again, here it comes again. Their desire was to paint in the American scene. That was kind of their mission statement. But one of the other things that kind of came out of this is they not only did regionalism, which Benton is very famous for, but then they got into this social realism. And that's kind of moving more towards, some of them were Marxists, communists. Joe Jones is probably the most well-known of the social realists that were here. These are some pictures of some of the early classes that were going on when they started the Summer School of Art. That happened a couple of years later, 1934, and by that time, the two leaders of the Summer School of Art was Jesse Beard Brickley, and by the way, I think that's a Brickley, either woodcut or lime cut, just to the left of the screen, and Amy Schleid. And Amy, again, came from an artistic family. She had been in Provincetown, and so she became very involved in this Summer School of Art. And this was a 1937 advertisement, which is the second year of the Summer School of Art. And you can see that pictures that I showed on the previous slide kind of came from 1936. You will notice that in this woodcut, they're thrashing wheat. And that theme, as we go through these pictures, remember wheat. Summer School of Art, they invited in Thomas Hart Benton. I mean, that was a high-powered instructor to come in. He looked at mural art as public art, and they brought him in to teach mural painting. One of the assignments that the students got that summer was to go out and sketch wheat thrashing scenes on a farm outside of St. Genevieve. Schleid, when she was talking about the summer school, said the advanced student will concern himself, most of them are girls, with the interpretation, man, nature, and society. And that's what's going to be kind of some of those same themes when they get into the post office rooms. This is a picture of Thomas Hart Benton and Joe Verst from 1936. We got these photographs, it was a serendipitous kind of thing. Mickey and I were in a cemetery one day looking at some work we wanted to do there, and this three-generational family comes walking in, and the eldest gentleman there was short, frail, thin. He says, I painted here back in the 30s. And Mickey and our ears just picked up, and it turned out it was Millard Chrisman, who was a student from Webster, and he came down here in 1936 and 1937 and was a student here. And his grandson scanned in these photos that he had taken as a student. I think he was like 17 years old in 1936. So he's got them dated and everything. I mean, it was just a marvelous find. And he was here when we did the Benton exhibit a few years back. Now, Benton had come up with a string of murals. Back in the early 30s, he did one for the New School for Social Research. And I wanted to show you these and kind of show his style. It's a lot different from, well, it's not a lot different, but it's not as kind of grotesque and flamboyant as the year apparel that he did during World War II. So in 1930-31, he did that one. And then in 1932, he did something called The Arts of Life in America. And you can see how big these are. I think this one's in the Whitney Museum now. But it again goes over doors. And you can start to see some of the, like this is quite a little bit more like what he was painting back in the 1940s. And then he did for the World's Fair in 1933, you know, all the states would set up their buildings there. He did one called Indiana, and to celebrate the history of Indiana. I think it's now at Indiana State University in their library. You can see again, those are pretty huge murals that he did. And we're starting to see some of the style you'll see in some of the other murals. The last one that was post office mural program was the House Lounge Office at the Missouri State Capitol. If you're ever up in Jeff City, stop in there and look at this. It's a marvelous piece. It's not without controversy. There's two references to St. Genevieve in there. One of them is a vertical log cabin, and the other one I think has to do with lead mining. But you can see he's got steamboats, he's got Missouri murals. So he's just coming off of this, and he's come to St. Genevieve to teach murals. And I think that shows the magnitude of that St. Genevieve art colony and how important it was. So let's talk about the St. Genevieve artists, instructors, and even students that ended up painting. And I've got pictures of 20 different post office murals that they painted. I'm going to start with Joe Jones because he was the one that painted the most. He painted 5 of them. Joe Jones was a house painter. He painted houses during the daytime, he painted art at night. He was a free-speaking spirit. They say he was very good looking and got along well with the ladies. There's a great picture in the book, in Dick and Kerr's book, of him smoking a cigarette. He looks almost like a James Dean kind of character. But he was a director of the art colony in 1936 when all of this was going on, and an instructor in 1937. Now, one of the things that I mentioned that he's very big on social realism. He was aligned with the workers' movement. He really liked to unionize things. And he was in with the American Communist Party. And some of the things that he and some of the art colony members did in the late 30s may have led somewhat to the demise of the art colony, because in 1938, there was a strike of the line company workers here, and people were out of work all summer long. And so, anytime there's a strike, you're going to have two sides, and so I don't think the art colony people were looked on quite as favorably as they were in 1936. And he was a major spokesman for the left and the art of the American scene. So he fit right in with Benton and the mission of the art colony. That's a self-portrait of him that he had painted. Now, in each one of these, I'm going to go through about 20 paintings. I'm going to show you the post office that it's in, up in the upper left-hand corner, and then the county marked in red on the map where this is existed, this particular one. Again, this is one that was not without controversy. When the first time he painted it, I think he had some African Americans eating watermelon and some other things that they thought that they could build, because they would have to get into discussion with the local postmaster, local artists, local politicians. And so they thought, hey, you're kind of making us look like a bunch of kids. So it was rejected. The first design he had was rejected, so he had to come back, and he paints this painting. It's in Magnolia, Arkansas. It's called Threshing, and actually, Jones was pretty famous for his paintings of wheat. I mean, even before he came here. But you can see it's a threshing scene. This one was about 4.5 feet by 12 feet, and it was oil on canvas. There's a couple I want to show you that were not oil on canvas, but the majority of them were. But it's, I think when I look around here, there's a couple of, when you look at this painting right here, you're starting to see the same kind of style that you'll see in here. There's another one back there at the line plant. I think that Mark Hill painted that's also in this style. He painted one down in Charleston, Missouri, on the Azalea Festival. It's again oil on canvas, and it's another threshing scene. And here you got a little bit of Missouri Mural in there. I want you, every time I show one of these, look at the post office. What post office does that look like? Looks like ours when it's painted. But, so this was another Joe Jones one. This is one he did in Dexter, Missouri. So if you want to go see some of these, they're not that far away. Some of them are, but I'll show you. But this one's called Husky and Clarn, and I think this one's a little more stylized, like the Benton kind of paintings are. But, you know, definitely 1930s kind of hats on these people, and again, you can see the door to the postmaster's office. Look at that post office, and the front of it, other than the roof, is a lot like ours. This is another wheat scene by Joe Jones. This one happens to be at Anthony, Kansas. Now, Anthony, Kansas is down in the center, it's one of the counties right on the Oklahoma border. Linda and I know a guy that was born very, he was a good friend of ours when we first got married. But their post office is pretty close to ours again. And you can see here, this is another oil on canvas. This one, we got a little bit of machinery in there with the tractors, and it's the old style with the metal wheels that they were just starting to use in the 30s. Oh, another wheat whip by Joe Jones. This one, I think, is done even more brilliantly. I think that his colors are really, really good in here. He's got these beautiful clouds. This one happens to be in Seneca, Kansas, so you're out there on the prairie. And I think he really captures what it's kind of like on the prairie out there when you see these big storm clouds coming up. Tractors, threshers, doing the wheat. Now that's up in the upper side of Kansas, upper right side. And I'd say this post office is almost like you got the Google on it, except this one's painted. Again, oil on canvas. Now the other guy that was pretty prolific in these post office murals is a guy named Joe Verse. Now, there's a family in St. Genevieve, the Verse family, that ran the Southern Hotel. And back in that era, there was a guy named Leon Verse that was the guy that had the livery stable. He's also the guy that started the gas station up there on the corner of 4th and Market, where the little shop there is on the corner. But this Joseph Paul Verse was actually a relative of his, but he was born in Germany. And he grew up, I think he was born in 1897, came from Essen, Germany. He saw all the horrors of World War I, and then the aftermath of that. I did find an article in a newspaper once, but while he was in Germany, he painted a mural, or a portrait of Leon Verse that had sent over. You can't find that. It would be a marvelous piece of our art history to find that. Somebody was writing about him and said, or he said, I like to paint the Missouri scene, not the American scene, the Missouri scene. Because he came over here, immigrated over here, lived in St. Louis for a while when he came down and was an active member of the art colony. He says, I like to paint the Missouri scene because to me it reflects the true American life, unspoiled and untainted by ruthless modernization. 1939 St. Louis Post-Dispatch. He likes America and is trying to see it straight. This picture is in front of the Shaw House. You recognize that. That's from the July 1936 collection. And he was really a good friend of Benton's. Even after the art colony, I think they met in New York a number of times, over in Kansas City when Benton was there. Well, the first one that, and these paintings actually went from 1939 to 1942. got installed. He's up at Vandalia, Missouri. I've never heard of Vandalia, but it's, I guess it's up north of you guys. Again, oil on canvas. This one's a little bigger too, 6 foot by 13 foot. And it's showing corn harvest back, putting them in shocks. I have to admit, I remember doing that as a kid, a young, very young kid. We put up hay loose and we put up corn in shocks. What's really neat about this, he's got the little Missouri murals in there, which Missouri's famous for. Again, you look at the post office, a little bit different ornamentation. It's like the first subdivision we lived in Kansas City. Every house had the same floor plan, they just had a different drum. This is another, they had more trouble in Arkansas than any other place. Joe's supposed to paint this picture down there, and when they started getting into discussions, this is the one that the locals said that he was stereotyping them as kids, and they didn't like it, so he had to change his whole design. And all this is going on with letters back and forth with Washington, D.C., and the local jury, and all of that. I think it's a wonderful scene. It's, again, farmland. I don't know how many octagonal or sextagonal barns there are in Arkansas. When you painted one of those are pretty rare.
It's like a silo.
Yeah, but I mean, it's got a big bottom and then a square top on it. But again, this kind of style of painting is, you saw the Joe Jones. Joe Burst is kind of continuing in that same regionalism style of painting. This post office isn't in red brick, it's in kind of cream colored brick, but it's the same design. I guess the architects didn't take that much money. I found most of these paintings or pictures of paintings online or Google Images. They're extremely difficult to shoot because they're all up high. One of these days I have to go in the post office with a ladder and really shoot straight on. So you get these really strange perspectives, and when you crop them, it doesn't look too bad, but it kind of stretches the perspective a little bit. This one is at Bethany, Missouri, which is up by Chillicothe, and their post office doesn't look like ours. The window's a little bit different. Sometimes the only thing they change is the window design. But again, the Missouri murals in there. I was trying to figure out if that's, I don't think it's a hop. It looks like hop, but it might be fruit trees or something like that.
Not up there.
In Northwest, it wouldn't be cotton. But this is called Time Out. You can see they're taking a break. The good-looking farm wife came out with her basket of food for her husband out there. The little girl's playing with the sheep. So that's a good, and I'm sure back, in the 1940s, we were still an agrarian rural society. We had, in St. Genevieve County, I think that it was 52 one-room schoolhouses. And in 1940, 75% of the students going to school went to one-room schoolhouses. So it was before my time. And I can tell you how agrarian and rural we were. This is the stuff we painted. This is another oil on canvas. Another guy that was here, who instructed in 1937, he was here in 36 also, was a guy named Joe Meir. He was another foreign artist, born in Belgium, and had come to America in 1910. This is one of the sad stories of artists that were here. He ended up in almost like an insane asylum, and was schizophrenic, and they were putting lots of drugs into him. He ended up in New York, and somebody recognized him and got him back to painting, using that as some of the therapy. He's almost got a haunting look in his eye in this painted picture of him. Now this is one up in Marceline, Missouri, North Central. It's called Contemporary Life in America. And what I think is interesting, here you got this agrarian society on the right, but they're moving over to the industrial city line. And I think that's his title as Contemporary Life in Missouri is really spot on here. It's a little bit same basic style post office, but a little bit different front on it. This is one that he did in Spencer, Indiana. I think it's the only one of our colony artists that actually did one in Indiana. It's in eastern Indiana. It's called Harvesting. It's not wheat. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but they were having lunch over here. I guess it's hay. That's what they're doing. And I do have to admit, we put up hay like that when I was a kid, on a wagon on a farm. I was on the board of Agricultural and Industrial Museum in Dark, Pennsylvania. They started bringing in stuff that we used as kids. I said, it's time to get off of this board. You're going to put me in the museum.
Bob, can I ask you a question about the one we just passed, the Marceline? Would that be the post office image that Walt Disney saw when he was a kid?
Oh, that's where it's from.
Yeah, he's from Marceline. So
Oh, he's from
I was thinking
Marceline.
it was probably built around the 1930s time period. So I would say, yeah.
Yeah. No gable roof on it.
No. Again, it's the same floor plan, change the roof, change the windows, change the door. I think I think this is one of my favorites, just because it shows that transition from
It's a little brighter too.
yeah. Well, some of that is the pictures that people take, some of them are very dark. This harvesting one, this one is a lot less of the browns that you see in the other ones. This one's got the greens in it. So this is like a May or June kind of painting with
That's the first star we saw.
yeah, it's on the and look at the color of that post office. Great dress. Another spring thing. Again, you see the tractor with the steel wheels. I think it almost looks like they're picking strawberries here. I kind of blew that up to kind of see what that was, but I kind of like this style. It's pretty straightforward. He doesn't do a lot of grotesqueness and.
That county's not where Mount Vernon is.
Yeah,
Mount Vernon's in southwest.
this is,
That was my mistake. I thought I'd wiki all of these to find out. I'll have to change that. Thanks, John.
You bet.
Okay, so that was Joe Beers. The other one was Miriam McKinney, Hoffmeister. She was a housewife that turned artist. But she did come from a family that did paintings and stuff like that. But she kind of took up painting and came down in 1932, that first year, to exhibit here at the art colony. And came back in 34 to be an instructor. She did another harvest scene. This one happens to be in Marshall, Illinois. And again, very much a wheat scene. And I think this and that American regionalism style of painting this really comes through. Oh, that post office looks a lot like ours, except it's got a different, they put a handicap ramp in front of it. Now this is a kind of an unusual one. This is one that Miriam did, and it's called White Fawn, and it's out of Forest Park, Illinois. And White Fawn was a little excursion boat that was on the river in Forest Park, Illinois, and that's really what she painted. So she was going to paint this scene that was really truly happened in that town. No, it didn't happen all the time. I mean, some of those wheat scenes, it's probably not where they had wheat that much. This is the only guy I couldn't find a picture of. James Beard Turnbull. I looked all over, couldn't find his in neither of the books on St. Genevieve Art Colony. And he came here in 36 and 37 to be an instructor. Now he did one down in Jackson, Missouri, just south here, so you can go see it. Boy, look at that post office. This is called Loading Cattle, and his style is a little bit different than you saw in some of the other ones. He really wasn't supposed to paint this one. When it was originally, the competition originally came out, he was supposed to paint one in Purcell, Oklahoma. And that one ended up being painted by Fred Conway. Fred Conway was supposed to paint this one, but the plotters had been switched over. But this one's well done. There's great detail in there, great clarity. Now this one's kind of interesting. This is another James Turnbull called the Lead Belt, but it's in Fredericktown. You know, I guess we all think of the Lead Belt as Deloge and Bonne Terre, but I guess you got Minor Lawn.
That's part of that town.
And again, I think what interested me about this here, you got this very rural agrarian scene on the right with the horses. There you got the lead mines with the start of a chat dump. I don't know how many of you in St. James know what a chat dump is, but when I was a kid growing up farming, we went over to climb the chat dumps. So, I mean, that again, I think that's like that contemporary life in Missouri. This is a great look at how Missouri's changing in that time period. One of the other artists that was here is a guy named Fred Conway. He came to us from St. Louis, taught at the Washington University School of Fine Art. He was a teacher here both in 35 and 37. And I think you artists might appreciate this. Later in life, somebody asked him what he was going to do when he retired. He says, why I'm going to paint since 1916, I've been trying to get a spot in the right place, and I'm going to keep on trying. I know a lot of you are never completely happy with your art, even though it's very beautiful. I kind of like that picture of him too. He looks very intense. Okay, so now he's in Purcell, Oklahoma. And this is the one that's probably the strength. It doesn't seem to be in that regionalism, American scene style. It's called Roundup. I apologize for the perspective that I give. This is somebody choosing up to do it. But you can see the cattle in there. It's a little bit different style. You look at the post office, and it's the only one that's a real different style too. Really kind of different. But I mean, he's painting what that location had down there. I mean, that's probably Cattle Drive.
Didn't the Texas Trail go right up through there?
Yeah, probably did. So that's what he's got the long arms and the Herbers coming up the road. Now here's one of, I think should be one of St. Genevive's favorite characters, Martil. I think it was Martil Suzanne Schweig, Langsdorff. And she was the daughter of Amy Schweig, who was the co-director of the Summer School of Art in 1936. And this is another one of those pictures for the Millard christening of Amy Schweig and her daughter, Martil. Martil was born in St. Louis, and she always went by Martil. You'll see all of her paintings are signed just Martil. This young girl must have had the most remarkable childhood. I mean, she's in this painting family. She went with her mother to Provincetown, got to meet all these famous artists out there. She comes to St. Genevieve for years, and she gets to meet the Thomas Hart Bettons and the Burst and the Joe Jones. I mean, it's just, I can't imagine from an artist standpoint being able to experience that and seeing the different styles and learning different techniques.
What's the Doomsday Clock?
Well, she ended up, I think in 1949, marrying a guy named Alexander Langsdorff Jr., who was a physicist and worked on the Manhattan Project. She eventually moves to Chicago or out Schaumburg. Well, the Doomsday Clock is something that says the world's going to go to hell in a handbasket and blow up. Every time that thing moves closer to 12 o'clock's doomsday. And they publish, right? You know how that's Doomsday Clock. Martil designed that. So that's kind of a little strange connection that you end up with a St. Genevieve artist ended up designing.
You're only 7 minutes away from Doomsday there.
That was in our good time. Russell, Kansas. She painted an oil on canvas again. scene in St. Genevieve when she was in the summer school of art. Or look at that post office. Except it's got bushes and all that. But again, she's really showing all this work going on there, doing it by hand, you know, pitching the bundles of straw on the wagon. Now this is another very unusual one. This is not in a post office. This is in the Recorder of Deeds office in Washington, D.C. She didn't do a competition for this one. The guy that was in charge of the program invited her to paint this one. And here she's only 23, 24 years old. And she's painting this picture. She got $750. It's called Cyrus Tiffany and the Battle of Lake Erie. Cyrus Tiffany is this African-American guy holding on to Commodore Perry. Again, there was controversy about this one, about the sword. Did Perry carry a sword, and was he left-handed? I mean, it got to be a big deal, and she finally found a statue of him. He's left-handed, and he's carrying a sword. This is a picture of the Recorder of Deeds office in Washington, D.C. It's the only one that I found that it wasn't in a post office, but in another one. This is another kind of deja vu thing. We're going to get to St. Genevieve now, which is probably our most, the one we like the most of all these post office murals. One day, after we moved into the house next to the post office, the postmaster came over and he said, "Would you like to see some photos of building the post office?" And this occurred in 1939. Petterton's owned that lot where the post office is. So we have this series of photos of the post office going on. I probably got 10, but one of the things I find when I do photographs of St. Genevieve, it's not what's in front, it's what's in the back. It gets to be very interesting. This building right here is the building, the old Audi Cleaner, where Mike Devaney had a studio, and it's a 3-story building. Now it's 2. This is, I like these two because they show my house in 1939 and 1940, and this big house across the street where Citizens Electric was built with Bill Overy's.
That's where I lived.
You lived in that house?
Yes,
It's a big brick.
When we first came to St. Genevieve in '48, they had an apartment there. I've always wanted to see, oh my gosh.
I'll send you.
Yes.
And you can see the place. What Bobby is saying is we always talk about why does St. Genevieve still have a lot of these old historic homes. It's because our people lived in them. We kept living in them. We did lose some, like the Overy building or the Rozier building down on the parking lot for the hotel.
Dunseys used to own that. Elmo Dunseys lived there too, or involved with that apartment complex.
But that's the only picture I've ever seen of
I've
that.
never seen that.
I was looking at the one up at the Felix Valley. There's a couple of boxwoods there, and they're pretty small in this picture, so they might date the boxwoods. And you can see some pictures. There was a big tree in front of the post office, and there was some later additions, but it was another one of those just little special moments when somebody came through with a little bit of St. Genevieve history. The La Guinée, La Guione, whatever. This is the St. Genevieve one. And it's again oil on canvas. And you know, when we think about the La Guinée, we think about characters and costume and old French guys doing that. It's a French tradition that came to us from France and Canada. And here she is, she's painting this in that American regionalism style, 1930s, characters dancing on the front porch of like the Jean-Baptiste Ballet House or the Bolduc House, because you can still see that architecture and the detail of the picture. And it's just it's a marvelous piece of work. And I understand she came back, was it the 80s or 90s, and cleaned it? Yeah. So when you leave here tonight, and you walk to some of the art galleries, just pop into the post office and you get to see this on the wall. The last one that I wanted to talk about was a student. Martel was a student. Matt Ziegler, of the Ziegler families, and Zieglers were some of the first Germans that came to St. Genevieve in the 1820s. But he was born here. He ended up being kind of, because I guess his family owned the Shaw House, and he had this cabin out off of M Road, and he became a host for the group, a cook, and he would provide, he would be the ones when somebody needed smart supplies, he would get it.
Didn't he own the French Inn?
Yes, and that was the Shaw House. And by the way, I think tomorrow night Teresa Brewery's going to talk about her experience. She was a model, and they've got the menu from the French Inn. They've got a nice little historical display. And this is Matt in 1936. I actually got to meet Matt because when we moved to St. Genevieve in 1936 or 1963, we bought the house from Matt, the Emil Bob house, and we used his backyard for a garden and show us into the slave quarters and all of that. But he was very interested in art. He had all kinds of art books. There's a number of paintings that he's done. I know Felix Valley has some of those on display. I mentioned, that you went through a process and there were a lot of letters. They have a copy of a letter where Matt Ziegler won a commission at a post office. And you can see it up there. They have it on display. By the way, from what I found in references, it took about 60 pieces of paper on the average to do one of these post office bills. Usually when I get into a research project, it starts growing. One of the neat things would be go to the National Archives and see if we can have all the letters for the D&A and Matt Ziegler's kind of sketches. If they had those, it would just be phenomenal to have. But go up there and take a look. You can see the letter. It says that don't say anything about it until the newspaper announcement comes out. Matt painted one in Flandreau, South Dakota. And the post office looks like ours. This was the hardest one to find a clear picture on because I only found one picture on the whole internet of this wheat in the shop. But again, it's that wheat complex. When I first went out to work with the State Historical Society, the head administrative assistant asked her where she was from. She said, Flandreau, South Dakota. And she was very familiar as a kid seeing this post office. Now this is one that was painted by Faye Davis. It's in Chester, Illinois. Now, it's a tempera paint rather than oil. There was a couple of them that were tempera. And again, this is, a riverboat town. You see the steamer there. You got the roustabouts loading stuff up. Probably got the fancy people over there to top that. The reason I put this up here is that Matt Ziegler assisted on this painting, as did a guy named Theodore Mueller Sr. I don't know how many of you know, there's a guy named Ted Mueller Jr. that just finished. He painted in our church the last time all the special artwork was done. Teddy Mueller did that. He's from Chester. He's a talented artist, reenactor. But his father helped on this painting also. So I kind of threw that in. It really wasn't one of theirs, but they don't.
And everybody should really know his wife Diane. She used to belong to the
Oh, yeah, right.
Really?
So kind of in conclusion, I think these post office murals are truly a legacy of the art colony. We had, again, eight people that painted 20 of these. I did put the little note down there. 7 of those 20 involved wheat scenes. I guess that one class really did it. In fact, that Joe Jones loved to paint wheat. And if you want to do some additional reading, there are a couple of books. One that the foundation helped publish by Rogers. And there's a nice section in the back of that that describes each of the artists that were instructors here. And it's really kind of, it was the first book that I read about the art colony, and then Dick and Kirk came out with that big colorful book. And I think when you look at that book, he shows more of the paintings that a lot of these artists did later in life when they were starting to go to different styles of painting. You're not going to see the kind of stuff in that book that I'm showing you here. There's one called All in All America Post Office Murals of the Great Depression. and articles from In Route, Off the Wall, New Deal, Post Office Murals by Patricia Rainer. Now, you can go on and find out in any state where there's a post office mural. If you just go to WPAmurals.com, it's a misnomer that it's WPA. Remember, it was a New Deal, it wasn't WPA. But they have a list, and if you want to find, if you're going to Nebraska and you want to find out where there's post office murals, who painted them, that's how you can find them. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm glad you all showed up. I hope you learned a few new things about St. Genevieve. All of these post office murals were that special program from the Fine Arts section of the Treasury Department. Now, there are other murals in public buildings and hospitals and parks and things like that that are truly WPA, but the post office mural program was its own program, and it was very unique how it was funded, and the fact that it was based on talent, not need. So if anybody's ever in Washington, D.C. and you're in the National Archives, look up this. Have those keep for Martell.
Bob, when Martell was, I think it was when she was restoring the mural, she gave a talk here for the Foundation for Restoration of St. Genevieve. A really good talk. It was at the KC.
Yes, it was. That's when you.
Yeah, I just, when I think about what she lived and experienced as an artist, that would be phenomenal.
We have some video of her talking to the article. Last time she was here. Well, even when we had a show, whatever that was, she sent a video. It was pretty interesting. Jana, I think, has.
It would be nice to convert that.
Singers, there are two out of the last one. Are you here, Anna? Oh, there you are. I didn't see. Don't you have it?
I got
Are
it.
they-
One where she's standing below the mural in the post office talking, and then again, she could make the trip when we did her picture as an artist. So she had a CD sent that she had.
And it's really interesting.
Artists sent questions, and they asked her the questions, and they taped it and sent it.
So is it on VHS?
She had her. The VHS is of the post office, and the CD is of the
We
interview.
can probably find
Sandra, do you
convert
have
the
that?
VHS.
It's really interesting. Do what?
Sandra.
Here?
Do you still have a copy of that?
Is that the interview that the young man did? I do.
She has one.
Okay.
Channel 7 and 98 TV and web broadcasting are made possible through contributions and donations from viewers like you. Thank you for your support.